Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will tell you about the HOA that put up a sign saying that I had been evicted. I keep a tin coffee mug on a hook by the back door of my mountain place. It's ugly, dented, and the handle's been resoldered twice, but it's a ritual for me. Hang my keys, grab the mug, breathe. The air up here tastes like pine and clean water. That little routine is how I punctuate the shift from the city noise to my own quiet acres. Except last April, I made it to the back door, keys in hand, and stopped dead because there was a neon orange sign zip-tied to my gate that read, "Notice of eviction, occupant removed, property now under the authority of the Homeowners Association." I stood there trying to decide whether to laugh or call the sheriff. The notice had a fake official look, bold type, legalese-adjacent phrases, even a random statute number that looked like someone shook letters and numbers in a soup can. I'd been in town 3 days for work. My truck bed still had lumber in it. My dog, Timber, was snoring in the passenger seat. He woke up with a sneeze and a groan when he realized I wasn't moving. I read the smaller print. It claimed that because the occupant, presumably me, had refused compliance with the covenants, conditions, and restrictions and failed to pay assessments, I was evicted, and any access was now trespass. If I tried to remove the sign, it threatened a fine. If I called any public authority, it claimed that no one can dispute the HOA's decision because the majority has spoken and the association's vote is final. My mountain place predates any HOA by half a century. It has a recorded deed, a land survey by a guy who wrote in blue fountain pen and drew a tiny spruce tree where the corner pin sits. There's no covenant, no assessments, no majority. I bought it from an older gentleman named Elias who kept everything in neat binders and still calls paper carbons half the time. He once told me the cabin had survived blizzards, a wildfire, and his first marriage. He said the land had a way of keeping people honest if you listened to it. That orange sign, it was a loud, dishonest thing. I looked up and saw there were 3 more signs at the end of my driveway. After the gate, there are 2 switchbacks up to the cabin. They'd zip-tied another notice around the milepost, and one to my hand-cut cedar fence near the trail. They used blue twine that I recognized from the hardware store down valley. The stamps on the back showed they were printed at a quick copy place. There was a faint diagonal scratch in the toner on 2 of them. The person who put them up had walked my driveway, probably the morning I left for town. Timber whined. His whine means, are we going to unload the truck or what? I unclipped the first sign, folded it into my jacket pocket, and unlatched the gate. The lock had a smear of bright yellow paint on it, like someone had tried to color it to match the sign. My stomach did a slow roll. Whoever did this had their hands on my stuff. I took Timber out on the long lead and we walked the fence line the way I always do after being away. The chain on the side gate was flipped so it looked like it was latched, but it wasn't. I keep that chain clipped tight to discourage moose from testing the slats. Timber put his nose up, sniffed, then looked at me with his "new smell not ours" face. I found fresh boot prints in the soft dirt by the cabin's front step, 2 sets leading to the porch and back down. The porch light was on. I hadn't left it on. I unlocked the door and did a quick sweep. Nothing obvious missing. The mantel had a little stack of mail. Someone had picked it up from the box at the road and set it inside like a favor. On top of the mail were 2 glossy postcards. They both showed a stock photo of a smiling couple toasting with juice glasses in an immaculate kitchen. "Welcome to the association," they said, with my address printed crookedly and a note about mandatory orientation. On the back were dates and a list of expectations, including no non-conforming wildlife attractants, no personal agricultural animals, and approved blinds required for all windows facing the road. I laughed then, one short, ridiculous bark of a laugh. Because blinds? This is a standalone cabin on 40 acres. My road is a private easement that climbs past a stream and a drop where the hawks like to hover. The only thing facing my front windows is the ridge across the valley, and the ridge doesn't care whether I have blinds. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor on the lower parcel, Jessa. "Are you seeing this?" she wrote. "They put up signs on my gate too. I'm shaking, I'm so mad. Also, they took my trash can? Call me." I called. She answered on the second ring with a voice too calm to be truly calm. "They told my child we don't live here anymore," she said without preamble. "Told her we'd been evicted by the community board and to collect personal items in an orderly fashion." "Evicted by who?" "By them," she said, and you could hear the italics. The new homeowners association that the developer down by the main road created for Phase 2. Remember them? They've been trying to rope us old parcels in. The developer sold the last of those lots to people who must think this is a golf course with elk instead of grass. The new president is a guy named Brentley. He has a clipboard and a hat with his name on it like a child at a camp. That tracks, I said. They left me signs all over. Said no one can dispute their eviction, which is not how anything works. Call the sheriff? She said. I called and dispatch said a deputy would swing by after lunch, but they also said it sounds like a civil thing. I am civil, but I swear to you, if they touch my gate again, I will show them what uncivil is. I'll call the county, I said, and the recorder's office, and Elias. If anyone knows the history, it's him. Be careful, she said, and hung up before she started crying again. I did a slow walkthrough of the cabin, took photos, marked the shoe prints, measured the stride out of pure stubbornness. There was a smell in the living room I couldn't place. Not bad, just not mine. A cologne that tried and failed to smell like cedar, maybe. I took close-ups of the notice signs at the road, making sure the language and typos were captured. I put Timber in the back with a treat and drove down to the county office in town. Orange signs crumpled on the passenger seat like the world's least convincing Halloween decorations. The county clerk's office has a jar of butterscotch candies on the counter and a poster reminding you to be patient. The clerk on duty, a woman named Dorleen, whose patience is the size of a national park, looked up when I put a sign on the counter and slid it toward her like I was showing her an animal track. She read it, snorted, and picked up a pencil. They can't do that, she said. They know they can't do that. The sheriff has told them they can't do that. Sit tight while I pull your parcel. She disappeared into the back with a purposeful shuffle. I stood there feeling my heartbeat in my throat. The jar of butterscotch caught the light, and I took one, because you should never turn down free candy when you're about to do something hard. When Dorleen returned, she had a man with her I hadn't met. He had reading glasses tucked into his shirt collar and a stack of files under his arm. This is our county council, she said, and I suddenly felt less alone. He wanted to see. He introduced himself as simply Gordon. He didn't say a last name, which I liked. He scanned the sign, shook his head once, then looked at my file, flipping through the recorded documents with the casual intimacy of someone who reads deeds for a living and finds them cozy. You've got what's called a grandfathered parcel, he said, tapping the page that showed the subdivision line. This parcel was carved out in the late 70s and then corrected in the 80s after a survey. The road is a private easement. There are no recorded covenants, conditions, or restrictions, no association, no assessments. Anyone asserting authority over your land needs a recorded instrument to back it. We've recorded nothing. There's no eviction without a court order, and even then it wouldn't be the association doing it. They can believe whatever they want to believe, but the recorder believes what's in the records. What do I do? I asked, candy wrapper between my fingers like a little flag. Take pictures, which you did, Gordon said. Call the sheriff to document the trespass if you want. Send a written notice to cease and desist. If they persist, we're now in the territory of slander of title and interference with quiet enjoyment. If they posted this on your gate, that's trespass. If they removed your mail, that's also a federal issue, and you might want to mention that when you speak to them. If they keep telling people you've been evicted, that's defamation. You're in a good position legally. But I'd also recommend you talk to your neighbors and think about whether you want to do something collectively, because these folks are likely to take it better if it comes from more than one person. I nodded. Relief prickled at the edges of my eyes in a way that would make my grandfather shake his head and hand me a rag to pretend I was wiping dust. Thank you, I said, and meant it down to the soles of my boots. On my way out, I signed the complaint form for nuisance signage, because that's the line item they use when the county has to remove fake notices from public view. Dorleen asked if I wanted copies of the parcel map, and I said yes, please, and she made them neatly and slid them to me like a talisman. By the time I drove back toward the mountain road, a white SUV with a magnetic placard and a glossy shine pulled in behind me and followed me past the old sawmill corner. The SUV had a small flag that made me think of a parade float. When I turned onto my private road, it followed. I stopped by my mailbox. In my mirror, I saw a man in a branded polo shirt step out of the SUV and adjust a hat with his name stitched in tiny thread above the brim. Brentley. He did not wait to be invited. He walked up to my window with a smile and a visible sense of personal manifest destiny. "Well, hello," he said, voice booming with a practiced friendliness. "I'm Brentley. President of the association. Are you the occupant here? I put the truck in park and rolled the window down all the way, because if I'm going to have a conversation about land, I like to let the sky hear it. I'm the owner, I said. What do you want? That's wonderful, he said, as if I'd said I'd just baked a casserole. Welcome to the community. We're really looking forward to aligning your property with the community standards. We posted notices. On my gate, I said. I took them down. They're illegal. Now I understand that change can feel sudden, he said, using the tone you use when telling a toddler that vegetables are good for them. But the association voted to incorporate all the parcels accessed by this road. It makes sense for the enjoyment of all, and it increases property values. We've amended the bylaws accordingly. Bylaws don't run with land, I said. Recorded covenants do. I don't have any. And if you plan to access my gate or my porch again without permission, I will call the sheriff and I will seek an injunction. Also, removing mail is a federal crime. Did you handle my mail? He blinked, the first crack in the practiced smile. Our community services coordinator maybe. Then your community services coordinator needs to stop, right now, and so do you. He shifted his weight. He wore city shoes on mountain dirt, the kind with thin soles and a brand logo you don't usually see paired with dust. Look, he said, we have a neighborhood watch. We have a landscape committee. We have approved exterior colors and wildlife deterrent rules so everyone can enjoy the elk without attracting predators. We've had complaints about your dog roaming. Timber, saint of the slow walk and the couch nap, let out a snore that sounded like a tiny motorcycle revving. My dog doesn't roam, I said evenly. He stays within my fence and on my land. Your lot owner's failure to keep their trash latched is not my responsibility, and you need to leave. At the word leave, his eyebrows twitched. He looked over my truck at the slope behind me, at the tall firs that line the driveway, at the hand-painted sign I carved that says, "Welcome, unless you leave gates the way you find them." He then did something that made me realize he thought he could really pull this off. He gestured toward the switchback like he was going to walk up. "I'll just put the orientation packet on your porch," he said. "We like to do hand delivery for the personal touch. Take one more step toward my gate and I will consider you trespassing," I said, not louder, just lower. "And for your records, I just came from the county clerk. They confirmed there are no recorded covenants on my parcel. You have no authority over me or my land. Your notices are false claims. Your statements to my neighbor's child were inappropriate and actionable, and you are to stop contacting me except in writing through an attorney, understood?" He tried a different smile. This one had fewer teeth. "I think we can get off on a better foot," he said. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable if you met some of the board. We have a gathering tonight. Light refreshments, meet and greet, a presentation on safety. We're announcing fines for non-compliant structures, and you'd be on the low end because your roof color is almost within the palette." "My roof is green metal," I said. "It sheds snow and reflects summer heat and was approved by the only authority that matters, the building department when it was installed. If you come up my road tonight or any night, you will meet the sheriff and my attorney." He stood perfectly still for 2 breaths, then adjusted his hat as if it was squeezing his head. "The association isn't going away," he said, with the cadence of someone who thinks persistence creates truth. "Sooner or later, everyone complies. It's just easier if you accept that now." "Goodbye, Brentley," I said, and let Timber bark once, a punctuation mark. He turned, stomped back to his SUV, and drove away in a flurry of dust and baffled indignation. I watched until the dust settled, and then drove the switchbacks with my window down, feeling the air move, and thinking of all the times people confuse a loud voice for authority. Jessa's place sits on the bend where the stream cuts a little oxbow. She waved me into her driveway like she was flagging down a ship. Her daughter Mira was on the porch swinging her legs. She's 9 and inspects adults the way the people's court judges inspect evidence, with skepticism and a willingness to be surprised. "They told me we're not allowed to have chalk drawings on the porch," Mira said by way of hello. Her mouth was a straight line. The chalk drawing at her feet was a bright elk, mid-leap, labeled with accurate antler tines. "They said it lowers property values." "Your art raises property values," I said. "That's a proven fact." "Do you need help with signs?" she asked. "I can take them down very fast. I have scissors." "I love the energy," I said. "But let me and your mom handle it, okay?" Inside, Jessa had 2 stacks of papers on her table. One labeled us, one labeled them. On top of them was a trifold brochure with a photo of a smiling couple, the same stock photo as my postcard but cropped differently, and a list of important reminders. It told us to please remove all non-conforming fencing and seek approval for livestock, which they defined as goats, chickens, bees, rabbits, or similar. Jessa keeps bees. She calls them her girls. I've watched her suit up and talk to them in a voice that is part lullaby, part pep talk. She said, "If anyone touches my hives, I will educate them about personal responsibility," and I believed her. We compared notes. They'd used the same blue twine on her signs. They'd adhered one to her rain barrel with duct tape, which pulled paint when she took it off. They'd left a typed letter on her mat that said, "Failure to comply will result in immediate action." And below that, in pen, someone had written, "Be the good neighbor we know you can be," with a smiley face. Jessa said the smiley face terrified her more than the threats. "Here's what we do," I said, channeling Gordon's calm. "Document. Send a certified letter telling them to stop. Let the county have a copy. If they come back, we call the sheriff. And we go to their meeting tonight to listen and record, not argue, so we have their statements in their own words. Also, I want to talk to Elias. He's had zero patience for these people for years and might have old letters that help." Jessa grinned with a piece of ferocity that I had only ever seen when she pulled a fishhook out of her own hand once without swearing. "Yes," she said. "Let's be boringly meticulous. It drives bullies bananas." At dusk, I put on my least mountain-looking jacket, a concession to the fact that sometimes appearances seal or pry open doors. I drove to the new community clubhouse at the base road, which used to be a storage barn until the developer added string lights and repurposed it into gathering space. The parking lot had more sedans and fewer trucks than I'm used to seeing up here. I parked on the public shoulder because I didn't want anyone saying I'd trespassed. I walked in with my phone in my pocket, camera ready, audio recorder app open. Inside, they had a projector showing a slideshow, bulleted lists, pastel gradients, a photo of a deer looking noble. People filed in carrying reusable shopping bags and name tags. There was a sign-in sheet. A man at the door asked me to write my lot number. "I'm here to listen," I said, and wrote NA because I'm that person. The sandwich tray in the corner listed gluten-free options, which I appreciated on principle, while also noting that the tray label said a brand name that was also in all their brochures. The brand name hinted that the developer had more than one hand in this, 2 hands and a foot. Brentley stood at the front with a wireless mic clipped to his polo, flanked by a woman in a floral blazer who introduced herself as the Community Services Coordinator, and a man with a tablet who called himself Compliance. Their energy matched a pep rally. He started with "Welcome neighbors" and segued into safety, standards, and the vision. The phrase "our mountain lifestyle" appeared at least 12 times in the first 3 minutes. Then they put up a slide with a map. I recognized my road. They'd shaded the entire slope in a light, soothing color and labeled it Association Area. I raised my hand. He ignored me. The floral blazer woman said they'd sent orientation cards to all affected residents, and that some people are struggling to acclimate to changes, but that's to be expected in any phase of growth. My jaw worked, but I kept my hand up. A man in the second row asked about non-conforming dogs off leash. A woman asked whether the association would handle the problem of that old man's junk by the stream, likely meaning Elias's meticulously organized woodpile and ancient tractor that he keeps like a museum exhibit. When they got to evictions, they called them non-judicial occupancy corrections. The floral blazer lady said, "Sometimes decisive action inspires compliance." The man with the tablet displayed a picture of one of the orange signs. He said, "We've had great success with notice postings." I turned my recorder volume up. My breath made the phone screen fog at the corner, and I wiped it with my sleeve. I raised my hand again and said, "Question," with the polite tone I use with my accountant. The room turned. Brentley smiled, assessed, then reluctantly nodded. I said, "What recorded instrument gives the association authority over parcels that were subdivided and recorded decades before your covenants existed?" He had the nerve to look bored. He said, "We voted to incorporate, and the bylaws were amended by a majority." I said, "Bylaws are internal documents. They don't bind landowners who aren't members. To bind parcels, you need recorded covenants or an annexation instrument accepted by each affected owner. The county recorder confirmed there's nothing on my parcel. So when you tell people I've been evicted, you are lying to them. When you post notices on my gate, you are trespassing. If you don't stop, you'll be hearing from my attorney and possibly the state attorney general's office." A whisper went across the room like wind through grass. The man with the tablet looked briefly, beautifully uncertain. Floral Blazer tried to recover. "We're not here to argue," she said. "We're here to welcome everyone." "Then stop harassing people who never joined," I said pleasantly. "Welcome them with quiet." A man in the back with a baseball cap said, "My realtor told me this whole area was under the association. If that's not true, I want to know why I paid for amenities." Another woman, clutching a brochure like a talisman, said, "You told us we wouldn't have to look at ugly things. If there's no association, then—" She trailed off like she'd seen the edge of a world she thought was round. Brentley leaned into the mic. "Let's refocus," he said. "We've already sent notices, and we stand by those notices. We'll continue our work." He scanned the room until his gaze came to me. "We're not going to let some holdouts ruin the vision." That was the moment I saw what this was for him. It wasn't about land, not really. It was about control dressed in the clothes of community. He planned to act like he had power until people believed he did. I left the barn while they were passing around a clipboard for volunteers for the landscape committee and stood under the string lights to make a quick call to Elias. He picked up on the second ring with a hello that sounded like he'd been halfway up a ladder and came down to answer. "They came to my gate," he said before I could speak. "They hammered a sign into my old fence post. I took it down and used it as kindling. That was some cheerful heat. Listen, in my second binder, the one with the green clip, there's a letter from the original developer's lawyer from when they tried something similar in the 90s. I wrote notes in the margins. Come by tomorrow and we'll feed the Sandhill crane and you can make copies." "You know you're not supposed to feed the crane," I said. "I've been not feeding that bird for 30 years, he said, which is mountain speak for, I feed the crane and the crane knows it. Bring that long-suffering dog of yours. He can scare off the rattlers. We'll put these shiny people back in their lane." I went home and wrote the first of what became many letters. I kept them factual and dry. Dates, times, what was said, what was done. I addressed them to the board of directors, to Brentley personally, and to the management company whose logo was on the brochure, though I didn't give that name to anyone in the room. I sent them certified and kept the receipts. I copied the county council and the sheriff. I printed an extra set for my binder because I learned from Elias, always have a binder. I slept with timber snoring at my feet and my toolbox near the door because the part of my brain that grew up being told to be prepared likes a physical object to point at. In the morning, the signs were back on my gate. They'd used new zip ties. There was a note handwritten that said, "Removing official notices is a violation of the fine schedule." The handwriting had the confrontational loop of someone who learned cursive to stab their point home, literally. I laughed aloud, I couldn't help it. It felt like being told by a child with a pretend badge to pay for parking in a cow pasture. I took pictures, cut the ties, and tucked the sign into my jacket to deliver to the sheriff like a cat delivering a lizard so you'd praise it. Then I set up my old trail camera on the tree opposite the gate, disguised with a flap of bark. I angled it slightly down so it caught the height of a person, not just elk knees. The camera snaps quietly, but it's enough to startle a person who's never been in woods at night. I hoped for a startled snapshot. The camera paid off by lunch. I pulled the SD card and there they were. Two people in glossy polos, faces clear as if they'd posed for a yearbook. One of them Floral Blazer from the meeting, the other the man with the tablet. The timestamp said they'd come just after dawn. They'd walked past the private easement for ingress and egress only. No soliciting sign I'd had up since I moved in. The woman looked directly at the camera with a glint of crusade in her eyes. She put a fresh orange notice on my latch and patted it like a parent proud of their child. The man took a selfie with my gate in the background like he'd climbed a summit. I sent the pictures to the county council with a short note. Additional documentation of trespass. Installing camera for continued evidence. Will file for restraining order if needed. Gordon responded within the hour. Received. I've forwarded to the sheriff's office and to our code enforcement to document the illegal posting. Suggest you also send a demand to their management company. Jessa texted, I found them putting a sign on Elias's fence. I told them to take it down. They told me to step back from official business. I laughed so violently I scared my bees. By evening, the sheriff's cruiser came slow up my road, respectful of washboards and wildlife. The deputy climbed out and introduced himself as Quinn. He had the tired expression of a person who has told people not to do obviously not okay things at least 50 times in a week and expects to have to do it 50 more. I can't arrest someone for this, he said, holding an orange sign between two fingers like it might stain him, but I can tell them to knock it off. I can take a report. I can stand in front of your gate when you remove the signs and they show up to argue. You want that? Yes, I said. I want a report on file, and if they show while you're here, I want them to hear you say the word trespass so it sticks. He nodded. I showed him the trail cam shots. He whistled a little and said, "They sure like being seen." He made a note of the time, the faces, the fact that they were on my private road. He handed me a card with a case number. "Keep calling," he said. "Don't let them wear you down." That was the beginning. In the days that followed, the association escalated like someone climbing a ladder made of rules they themselves had hammered together in the dark. They sent me an invoice for assessments I didn't owe, with a due date highlighted in green and a note that said, "Delinquency will result in liens." They hadn't recorded a thing. But the point of a threat is not always to do the thing. It's to make you behave as if they already have. They started sending me violation notices for unapproved exterior fixtures and non-compliant plants. The fixtures were a wind chime Elias made me from bent spoons and a whipped belt buckle. The plants were wild lupine. I responded to each with a single sentence. "I am not a member of your association, and your authority does not extend to my parcel. Cease and desist all contact except through counsel." I copied the county council and the state consumer protection division. I began a list of names of people who called me secretly to say they'd been pressured into joining and now regretted it, but weren't ready to say so publicly. Parallel to all this, two other plot lines tangled themselves through my days like fishing line that someone had thoughtfully handed me already knotted. The first was Elias's health. He had a stroke 2 winters ago, and you can hear it in his left foot when he's tired. It drags. He refuses to admit it unless he's bribed with blueberry pie. The association, sensing vulnerability, started sending him letters with phrases like fitness of property for occupancy and safety hazards. They took photos of his tractor and posted them in their newsletter with a caption that said, "We're tackling blight." In one photo, you could see Elias standing in the background like a man in a painting, watching his own house burn in the distance. I drove over and sat with him on his porch while he drank coffee that had been reheated one too many times, and I promised him I would handle it. He nodded, put his hand on Timber's head, and said, "You know I don't like fighting, but I like being told what's mine isn't mine even less." The second plot line was the access road. The new association had funded resurfacing the first half-mile of the base road, but they'd done it without consulting the county on drainage, and the first rain sent a rivulet cutting across the easement like a knife. Downstream, on the lower properties not under their umbrella, it caused erosion that took out a small footbridge. The association tried to say the footbridge owner had to fix it. The footbridge owner, a quiet teacher named Naomi who grows strawberries like a magician, showed up at the next meeting with a printout of the county's stormwater guidelines and a timeline of when the resurfacing happened compared to the rain. Her voice didn't waver once. She said, "You did this, you fix it." And somewhere in the back of the room, someone clapped without meaning to. They stopped clapping halfway, embarrassed, then finished the clap because once you start, the sound needs somewhere to go. Some nights in that first month, I wondered if I should have hired an attorney on day one. People with clipboards and a misapplied sense of destiny can make enough noise that tired systems just move the problem along. But I wanted to draw the line between neighborliness and control with my own hands before calling reinforcements. I did call an attorney, Margot, voice like granite and chamomile, and told her to stand by. "Document, document, document," she said. "Don't respond to anything that isn't a legal demand. If they record a lien, we move fast. If they step on your porch, seek a restraining order, and keep being boringly reasonable." So I practiced boring like an instrument. Letters went out the same day every week. I hid a second trail camera in the birch grove. I laminated a note at my gate. "Private property, not subject to your association. No trespassing. Notices will be photographed, delivered to the sheriff, and used to seek an injunction." The level line on that sign pleased me more than it should. Then a courier in a blue blazer arrived with thick paper, a policy called Immediate Area Adjudication. My parcel, by virtue of contiguity and access, was hereby adopted, and no one can dispute the vote. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. I pinned it to the workbench under a trout magnet, took photos, forwarded it to Margot in the county, texted Jessa, and stacked wood until the world made sense again. By week's end, I had a plan, compliance so precise it turned into a mirror. File for a declaratory judgment that my parcel wasn't subject to their covenants. Send a retraction demand for slander of title. Team with Naomi on a hydrologist report to fix drainage they'd botched. Host a quiet potluck at Elias's to gather legacy documents. Bring the green clip binder and blueberry pie. Finally, package the worst quotes. No one can dispute. Non-judicial occupancy corrections and that map shading my road like conquered territory. And ship them, with audio, to Consumer Protection and the Licensing Board. The county knocked down a carved Community Rules All Parcels sign they'd planted on right-of-way. A junior investigator visited my porch with a notepad. My trail cam photos and audio made his eyebrows climb. "They said no one can dispute the eviction?" he asked. "Into a mic with a slide," I said. Meanwhile, a friend at a bank tipped me about an unrecorded lien letter the association had mailed around. Margot filed my declaratory action and sought a temporary restraining order. We held the potluck at Elias's, 28 neighbors, pie, and a scanner humming. When the white SUV rolled up, Deputy Quinn appeared like a stage cue and told them to leave private property. They did, dust-mouthed and blinking. The next morning, Consumer Protection called internal memo located. Gradually absorb legacy parcels via signage and public assertions. At the hearing, Margot laid out title, trespass, false threats, and that memo. The association's lawyer said community until the word stopped meaning anything. The judge asked twice for a recorded instrument binding my land. None existed. Ruling, declaratory relief, injunction against entry and misrepresentation. You cannot bind land you don't have an interest in by announcing that you do. We recorded the order. Dorleen at the counter slid it back with a smile. For when they pretend they can't read. Punishment arrived by paper and pocketbook. Consumer Protection issued a consent order. Stop false claims. Correct marketing. Offer rescission to misled buyers. The licensing board opened an ethics matter. The county billed them for illegal signage removal and unpermitted roadwork. Refunds went out. Absorb via signage became a cautionary tale forwarded with grim amusement. Brentley finally asked to meet. Neutral ground, witness present. Timber, my dog, who believes in second chances that smell like roast chicken. Brentley handed over apologies and a signed directive barring further contact with non-members except through counsel in true emergencies. "I thought we could make it true by acting like it was true," he said. "You tried to build a jurisdiction," I answered. He nodded, smaller and human. I took the papers. Absolution wasn't mine to give. Calmer neighbors, Birch the librarian, Owen the paramedic, Ari the science teacher, won board seats. The bylaws were scrubbed of non-member fantasies. Buyer guides were updated to admit the patchwork. Naomi's strawberries sweetened after proper drainage. Jess's bees were rebranded from livestock to pollinators. My framed museum now holds 2 documents, the confident lie and the correction. Delivery drivers glance up and learn the phrase paper tiger. Winter settled. A postcard from Birch, policies fixed, communications restrained, honesty adopted if not perfected. Someone left a hand-carved wooden pine cone on my step for your museum. I put it between the frames, a defanged symbol made gentle by context. In spring, we celebrated the footbridge holding through melt. The crane came, hinge call and wing wash like pages turning. No one mentioned bylaws or orders. We didn't need to. The land knew, and we knew. Maybe the real consequence wasn't the fines or refunds. It was losing the illusion that a marker can redraw the ground. Neighbors aren't a population to manage. They're a chorus you join if you can hear the key. Quiet returned, not silence, but honest sound. The orange notices now line my kindling drawer. The gate hangs straight, pine and clean water in the air. I hang my keys. I grab my mug. I breathe. Friends, thank you. See you soon.